Hang on one second.
Okay.
I'm looking for, oh, there's the secretary. Okay.
All right, you are live.
Okay, great. Well, then it's a great time to kick us off and welcome everybody to, I think this is our last, I know it is our last subcommittee meeting of the bonding committee. And today we have before us OPM, Office of Policy and Management. And I want to first, Secretary McCaw, welcome you. And on behalf of the committee, thank you and your team for all the work that you have done through a very difficult 2020 and beyond. We know you have been at the right side of the governor and working to keep us safe and healthy. So thank you for everything you've done for us. And we've met with about 20 agencies at this point, and listen to what the requests are, what the governor's recommendations are. We've had a lot of great questions from our committee members around the future of the programs, and dug a little deeper, had a deep dive into what those programs are and what that funding would do and how they would benefit those agencies. So it's only fitting, some of those questions were deferred to OPM, so it's only fitting that today you will be our grand finale. So we welcome you. And but before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the leadership team of the bonding committee for their hello and welcoming remarks. And I'm going to start with our senator from the Great Park City, Senator Marilyn Moore.
Well, Representative Bora, I didn't know you knew that we were the Great Park City.
I worked in the Great Park City, and we'll talk about that another day.
That's great. Good morning, everyone. I'm looking forward to this with Secretary McCaw, who is the master of planning and money. I'm always overwhelmed and really respectful of what she knows, ability to move these dollars and get things done. So I look forward to the meeting with everyone here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moore. I don't see Senator Huang yet, so Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. I will join in welcoming our Secretary of OPM. It's a pleasure to have her here and looking forward to it. Also, the ranking member of the full Finance Committee, welcome her and everybody for attending, and thank you very much, staff, for putting this together.
Great. Thank you, Representative Piscopo. Secretary, did you want to introduce your team up front, or did you want to introduce them as it's applicable as we talk about different areas? It's really up to you.
Sure. So I'd love to introduce the team up front. And first, I just want to thank you, Representative Bora, Senator Moore, and Representative Piscopo, Senator Wang, and his absence. I'm sure he'll join us shortly, for the warm welcome and for the warm kudos. Certainly, it's a pleasure to serve, and we appreciate your leadership and your partnership as it's been a really tough year throughout the state. And you've been voices of advocacy and making sure that those needs get to the ears of the administration. So we're pleased to be here with you today and to wrap up your process and answer any questions that we can help you with. I'm pleased to be here today with several members of the OPM team. First, Deputy Secretary Costa Diamantis is here today. In addition, Steve Kitowitz, who is a long veteran of leading OPM's capital program, is here with us today, along with Undersecretary Martin Heft, who oversees our intergovernmental division. We are fortunate to have with us Mr. John Vittner, who leads the OPM IT program, and we partner with the Department of Administrative Services. And I believe that concludes the members of the team that are here, and they're here to support with any of your deeper dive questions. And we will be happy to get started if you're ready.
Great, thank you, Secretary. And I know a lot of members of your teams have worn many hats throughout the years within state government, so we thank them for their service as well. What we have done is, for each agency, for the sake of time, we didn't have the agencies provide a presentation. We reviewed the presentation beforehand and then had each point person here to discuss their agency. So I know we did that with OPM as well, but I still want to give you an opportunity to just, talk a little bit about high level, the structure of the bond building intent, the priorities. What are the long-term goals? What are the short-term goals of the governor with respect to bonding?
Excellent, happy to do so. So the package that the governor has provided to the legislature for your consideration has total new GO bond authorizations of approximately $1.4 billion in the first year, $1.419 billion in the second year. Essentially, the governor proposes a level amount of new authorizations consistent with the bond package that was approved by the legislature for the current biennium. The areas the governor is prioritizing includes one, honoring our commitment to municipal aid. We know that our municipalities rely on these resources. Some, it supplements their general fund or their capital programs. And our municipalities are experiencing some challenges during this time, similar to the state. But it is a very important time to be able to focus on economic development. So municipal aid is important. Affordable housing is another area of focus. New authorizations in the area of housing. You've probably spent some time with Commissioner Mosquero Bruno to talk a little bit about some of the vision for being able to continue the work and to expand opportunities, not just in our urban centers, but also in our suburban centers. And our funding helps to ensure that there's affordable housing for lower income families, for seniors, for disabled populations, and we believe that's critical to keep those investments in the budget. School construction is a significant portion of the portfolio, and we have the deputy here who will certainly speak to that at a later time. We honor the commitments of the projects that have been approved through the priority list process, as well as some of the smaller non-priority needs, such as roofs or HVAC systems, and our districts need that support, and the governor honors that commitment. The administration is heavily focused on IT capital investments, ways to ensure that our citizens, when they interact with state government, that it feels like the current century, that it is less manual and difficult, to streamline that experience, as well as provide our agencies and employees with tools to do their jobs in the most efficient way. We want to make sure that we are leading edge in how our agencies perform their jobs, and that Connecticut's not a laggard, but we're able to be a leader. So a lot of focus on continuing IT improvements. Economic development is an area the governor is heavily focused on. In the coming weeks, you will hear more about his economic action plan. He feels very strongly that as we are entering into the recovery phase of coming out of the pandemic, that we have to make investments to ensure that Connecticut has a strong comeback, that will have heavy partnership with our local municipalities, hoping to bring some private investment to the table. But now is the time not to restrain, but to provide the opportunities for investment so that years down the line, hopefully not too far down the line, we can begin to reap some of that benefit and that return throughout the state. As we are experiencing significant unemployment that was brought about by the pandemic and the need to close some of our sectors, we feel there's a strong need to invest in workforce development. And you have probably learned through your conversations with the Department of Labor and DCD about the governor's vision on the Office of Workforce Strategy and the work of the Governor's Workforce Council. There are new resources in here to ensure that we can invest in workforce development programs, and this also will be an area the governor seeks to focus on with some of the ARPA funding. And finally, we have a responsibility to ensure that our state agency infrastructure is maintained, that we are able to make progress on our deferred maintenance. Obviously, if we can maintain our assets, it helps to keep some of our operating costs lower. And so we continue to advocate for funding to ensure that we can honor those commitments. The OPM portfolio is largely focused on municipal aid. This is where the Urban Act authorizations are focused. Our IT capital investment program, those authorizations are attributed to OPM. Our capital equipment purchases for agencies, and things like a body dash or camera programs that come out of our criminal justice program. But overall, this is a package that gives us a menu of options to think about investments that will help us recover and to, 2-3 years from now, begin to reap some of the benefits of areas of investment. And the governor's hoping that we can partner in making sure these authorizations come to fruition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. That's a great overall description of the bill. And in a few moments, I'm going to go to our individual legislators, whom I know have a number of questions around specific agencies or project requests. But I want to just touch on some of the themes that have come up over the past couple of weeks in our meetings, and wondering if you could talk about the debt diet and where we stand today with respect to the debt diet.
Absolutely, Representative Borer. As you will recall, when the governor came into office and with some of the fiscal challenges and structural deficits that we faced, we spent some time looking at historical levels of spending. And yes, we named the approach to planning, I would call it planning for a certain level of spending for bonding, a debt diet. It certainly was a lower level of issuance than we had seen in the past, but still a significant amount of investment. And so the debt diet, or the goal of issuing around $1.6 billion of debt each year, allows us to put on the bond commission anywhere from $1 to $1.3 billion of new projects every single year. I wouldn't view the debt diet as having been restrictive. We have a lot of capacity to make investments, even with allocating through the bond commission that level of spending on an annual basis. Interest rates are very low, and so certainly we have capacity if we needed to go above that. It's been a benchmark goal that we would strive towards the 1.6 billion. We've been able to do so, and I believe we still have some excess capacity to do a little bit more in terms of projects that we focus on and putting a little bit more throughput on the bond commission agenda. So, our focus right now is less so about living within the 1.6 billion. It's more so about what are the smart investments that we need to make to ensure that Connecticut is thriving and it's growing. Do I believe that's achievable with still issuing around 1.6 billion of debt? Yes, I do. If there is a critical project that is transformative for the state, would the governor go above that? He absolutely would. He's heavily focused on smart investments for the state of Connecticut.
Okay, great. So building on the restrictiveness of the bonding over the past year, we have $2.9 billion in unallocated balances. And this bond bill requests another $3 billion in total, almost, in new funding requests. As we've met with the agencies, there have been some challenges on the legislative side to consider new projects and new funding recommendations when the funding that had been approved by the legislative body, along with the governor, in the past bond bills have still not been allocated to a lot of the priorities that we have agreed upon that we would like to see out in the community. So can you talk a little bit about what is the plan for the unallocated balances? And are we going to disseminate the funds of the unallocated balances of those programs and through those agencies before we entertain some of the new programs, if that makes sense?
Sure. So first of all, just looking at the Office of the Treasurer monthly report from April 1st, 2021, for GO bonds, we have approximately $2.1 billion in authorizations that have not yet been issued. Okay. And we have proposed another 2.8 billion. Okay. So when we're thinking about authorizations, we should be thinking about that in terms of what is the menu from which we want to select investments. We would never in a given year be able to fully allocate all remaining authorizations in another 2.8 billion. The question is, do we have the authorizations in place for the types of projects we'd like to pursue? And then throughout the year, we focus on which of those projects should move forward within our availability of funds. So the strategy or the approach that we take is obviously we monitor spending. What drives the amount of issuance that the treasurer needs to issue is spending. How fast do we spend? And right now, we have $5.4 billion of GO bonding that has been authorized by the legislature but unissued. And we have 2.1 billion that has been authorized by the Bond Commission and unissued. So we do have to look at what projects have been approved, how fast are we spending them, and what cash flow do we need in terms of bond issuances, and then what else do we want to add to that plate? It's a little bit more than just putting on the Bond Commission everything that's bond bill. We have to look at the decisions that our predecessors have made and how fast they're spending on those projects. Now, in terms of the areas of focus, I think really haven't changed. The priorities that the legislature set last year are similar. It's still economic development, workforce development, agency infrastructure, where I think what we need to work on in the next 2 years will be what are the types of projects that the executive and the legislative branch jointly would like to see move forward.
Okay, I appreciate that response. And so when it comes to the unallocated balance and priorities, for example, the Urban Act grant, right? So we see a lot of unallocated balances within that. And typically those are economic developments and those are focused in our municipalities to support our communities. Are you saying that the unallocated balances in the Urban Act grant are because the projects haven't tapped into the funding that is needed for those projects, or because because the governor hasn't allocated that on the bonding commission agenda?
So first, a lot of the projects that come forth that are sent to the administration, they run a myriad of in terms of the types of projects. We're not seeing a lot of ideas coming forth for Urban Act that are economic development related. I encourage you to focus in on that area so that we can use those Urban Act dollars for that purpose. We look at the requests that come through and we try to sift through and find those economic development opportunities, and sometimes that's a little thin. I don't believe that we would ever fully allocate every dollar for Urban Act. It depends on the type of project. If it's a project that's going to a municipality, then the vehicle to move it would be Urban Act. We need the authorizations in place so that we have a menu to choose from. And we need projects and ideas from the legislature that align with economic development. So I would recommend that we work together to really push our municipalities to bring those ideas to the state level. That is what you're going to hear when the governor releases his economic action plan, is really the strong partnership and vision for the state, and looking for municipal leaders, yourselves, as well as the mayors and first selectmen, to put forth ideas that are going to help them, the ideas that are going to help them grow their grand list. Those are the sorts of investments that the governor has an eye for.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier the economic action plan. When did you say he was releasing that?
It's likely within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Okay.
We look forward to that. And so to follow up on the debt diet and follow up on the unallocated balances, what would you say is the occurrence of the bonding agendas, the bonding commission meetings in the near future? Will we see bonding commission meetings continue for May, June, July, August? They have been, and I certainly understand we've been in a pandemic, but what are the plans to hold bonding committee meetings, commission meetings?
The pandemic certainly has added some additional challenges. We have a bonding meeting that's scheduled for tomorrow. We anticipate having our next bond commission meeting in June or early July. We try to time the frequency for when we need to move a large number of items. For example, there might be closings that need to occur for Department of Housing or for some of our CRDA related work, or for other agency infrastructure needs or needs of the legislature. So we typically are aiming for an every 2-month cycle, depending on the projects that are coming forward and whether or not we have a good number of projects to move.
Okay, great. And I know there's a number of hands that are building in the queue. I just wanted to ask a lot of, overall high level questions to kind of set the stage, because those are questions that have been a common theme throughout our agency committee meetings. And I'm just looking because we did ask members to send some questions ahead of time. One of the growing concerns is the nonprofit. And I think it jumped out at everybody that there was no recommendation for the nonprofit grant, and we still see a significant amount of unallocated balance in the nonprofit grant. So can you talk a little bit to that?
Sure. So there's a $50 million in unallocated balance. We did not recommend any new funds. We believe that amount would be adequate to support the needs over the biennium. We have our ear to the ground in terms of what the needs of the community might be. Certainly one area of focus could be to support some of the nursing home infrastructure needs. But the reason for no additional authorization is because we do have $50 million that could be utilized over the 2 years in the biennium.
Okay, great. We think they could use it now. Will there be another round of nonprofit grant awards?
We do expect that we will be moving some nonprofit grant awards. Some of the areas we probably want to focus in on are the challenges they experienced coming out of the pandemic. We don't have a time on that per se, but the needs of the nonprofit community have been very much heard. And so you should expect to see some movement there.
Okay, great. They have been the backbone of our community during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then one final question before I turn it over around structure. So building on the nonprofit grant, typically FQHC would get funding maybe through that grant, or mental health agencies. And we typically think of those services as more operational costs, but they have capital needs as well. And we've supported them in the past through bonding. With all of our focus and priority on healthcare, has there been given any thought to having a special bucket, for lack of a better word, that focuses on healthcare? So a recommendation of funding that really supports, whether it's our FQHCs, our mental health facilities, our agencies that are in the community that are really serving those that we know are lacking, right? Access to quality, affordable healthcare, and really have been, again, the backbone of the community. So what are your thoughts around healthcare and our support of all of those agencies in Connecticut?
Sure. So the beauty of the nonprofit grant program is that it is run as a competitive RFP type process. So we could allocate funds and through that process earmark it, if you will, or prioritize that RFP and say it's going to focus on our community health partners, for example. Or we could allocate funds and say we really want to focus this on nursing homes or assisted living type facilities. So we have flexibility with the nonprofit grant program to target funds towards a specific purpose. So one way to accomplish this would be to utilize the nonprofit funding. And when those allocations go to the bond agenda, be very specific about what types of organizations that process would support. If the legislature felt that they wanted a specific funding source to just make the intentions clear, certainly that's something the administration would not have an issue with.
Okay, great. Because there are so many community needs in the nonprofit arena, not just focused on healthcare, right? Whether it's arts and culture, or whether it's childhood programs. There's so many nonprofits out there that are in need, and they're competing for the same bucket. So, okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to Representative Meskers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary McCaw, I want to thank you again. I think I probably have voices in the past, but I think in my entire career on Wall Street, I've never seen a person who's more in command of the facts and figures and does an incredible job. I may not always agree 100%, but I've never seen anyone as masterful and as well-intentioned and thoughtful and thought-provoking. So I guess the first one I'd like to talk about is within the constraints of where we're headed at the federal level in the infrastructure and proposals for infrastructure, and where we're going right now on this bonding committee and commission, right, as we look at things. How comfortable are you, or where do you think we'll be in the needs to pivot? Because what I hear fundamentally on the infrastructure plans is, depending on where the numbers go, we're looking at an 80-20 federal state split potentially for a lot of the fundamental infrastructure. And since you were talking about trying to hand out fishing rods instead of fish in terms of the municipal getting the mill rates and getting properties back on and infrastructure for the economics, being in a biennial budget, how do you envision that rolling out? Because I'm worried that we sit down and in May, the proposals all don't encompass what needs to be done to qualify for the matching grants from the feds. And I want every one of those 80 cents on the dollar federal funds. So if you could speak to that first, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative Meskers, and I appreciate your kind remarks. So first of all, my thoughts are, in order for us to be prepared and ready for the infrastructure opportunities and what flows first out of Washington, that is the reason why we have a diverse set of authorizations, because if we need to utilize, Urban Act as the vehicle for a match, that will give us flexibility for municipalities, right? We want to make sure that we have a broader way of authorizations on the books that meet the requirements in order to match the dollars that are coming out of Washington. Transportation is another area where we want to make sure that we can, if we needed to have some cash financing or adequate, debt capacity to match those funds, that's very important. So what you have in front of you and your traditional approach to putting together a bonding package, I think will work just fine with the package coming out of Washington, because you have authorizations that are kind of generic in nature. If you get very specific and you don't have things like Urban Act that are very general, then our hands would be a little bit tied. You might have to come back and take action to give us an authorization funding source that could service the match. But based on the types of authorizations we have, Urban Act being one of the major vehicles, I don't currently see that. I don't see any problems or barriers for Connecticut being in the position to leverage the infrastructure dollars coming out of the federal government. What I think is most important is planning. That when it's time to put those proposals forth, are we ready as a state with the cutting edge opportunities that will be compelling, and so that we'll be successful in getting those funds? And so leading into the governor's economic action plan, it should get the minds and the thoughts and the processes and planning efforts of municipalities really get that geared up. Because they obviously have significant resources available to them through ARPA. We have resources, and then add to that the infrastructure fund. So he really wants to heavily focus in on bringing the ideas for those economic development projects to the forefront. It could be economic development, it could be broadband, water, sewer, the critical infrastructure needs. We need to be ready. I think that's what's most important is we as a state need to be ready. But this bond bill should certainly put us in a good position to the extent that we need to do any match.
Okay, well, thank you. I may come back with a question later, but I really appreciate this. I think that's all for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Meskers. Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Madam Secretary. It's great to have you here. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And ditto on the words Representative Meskers just said.
Thank
I
you very
agree
much.
with them wholeheartedly for a change on that one. But just a couple quick questions. And the first one goes to Steve. Well, first of all, let me just say that I applaud the debt diet. It's great that the governor took that position. And I like your explanation of how you will carry it out, the debt diet. I'm one that kind of applauds when there's not a monthly bond commission meeting, meaning that we are showing some restraint on what the state borrows. So I think just as a general statement, I will say that. But just in general, if I may go through some stuff, and the first thing that concerns me is in economic development, that new program, CT Jobs, big initiative from the governor. I've read the bill a couple times. I agree with a whole lot of that bill. I really like the idea of putting job training, coordinating it all with economic development, having and having that coordination from there with higher ed and what needs to be done. My concern is that I'm pretty protective with bonding for ongoing expenses, non-capital ongoing expenses, such as salaries and stuff like that. I checked over the appropriation side, and there was very little I could glean from trying to, it's been a while since I've been on approx, but there's very little funding for that on that side of the budget, meaning ongoing expenses. It seems a lot of this brand new initiative is in bonding. Cause for concern, but we should be a little protective of our borrowed money, as you would agree. It's $20 million a year. There's an awful lot of questions I have on this bill and this new program. Can you try and just very briefly, as briefly as you can, just kind of explain trying to lay my concerns on that kind of philosophy?
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative Piscopo. So first, the broader vision. The broader vision is that here we are a year after the pandemic, and you will remember that a portion of that CT Jobs proposal and incentivizing businesses to increase jobs in exchange for some amount of credit on their taxes, the proposal that came through the midterm governor's budget. And we've expanded upon that now because of the work of the Governor's Workforce Council that has spent a lot of time looking at the data and hearing directly from businesses, employers throughout the state as to what their needs are for jobs. And they've identified areas where the pipeline is not producing those skills. And what we've learned in looking at, economic growth from the perspective of attracting and retaining business is that it's critical for us to be very strategic and intentional about making sure that our institutions with higher ed certificate programs are actually producing the talent, because businesses leave when they can't access the talent. And so building off of that tax credit program is now a real strategic effort to hone in on what if Kelly, our director of workforce from here, she would call sector-based training initiatives to upskill and to produce those employees that our businesses need. And so some of that vision started even before it started in the first biennial budget. You might recall the Workforce Training Authority that was contemplated. You will notice in this budget package that we actually canceled $70 million. We thought that amount was was very large, but instead we replaced it with a $20 million in each year authorization. So I'd say first, it's less than the amount that had been sitting there as authorized and had not been utilized. But I think the second thing I want to point out is economic development is what we're looking for in terms of the outcome. We want to see growth. In order to feed growth, one of those inputs really is the workforce, and we have to make investments in the workforce. So, if I were wear my traditional CFO hat, I'd say the capital program should support hardcore infrastructure, buildings, construction, but it is not uncommon for states to use the capital budget and investment to achieve an asset like economic growth. So traditionally, if we were to do things to the letter of a finance officer's book, you'd want to fund job growth on the operating side, but we are constrained by the spending cap. And on the expense side of the house, our debt service costs are growing, even with trying to live at $1.6 billion. We're issuing new debt. We're adding to our debt service cost. Our pension costs are growing. Our salaries and wages are entitlement costs. And so if we don't want to miss this opportunity for investment, sometimes we have to be a little bit flexible. For that reason, we limited ourselves to $20 million in each year in the bond package. And we have an unprecedented opportunity, though, with the American Rescue Plan Act funds to also use some of those dollars towards workforce development. And hopefully that gives you a little bit more comfort that we're doing a little less on the bonding side for workforce development because we have alternative resources available. So I would say that going strict and not wanting to use bonding for workforce development at the expense of growth at a time when there's so much unemployment that's probably not the most prudent course for the state of Connecticut. The people need help in upskilling, and we've got to bring some resource to bear. And we as a state are going to see benefit from that, because if we can recover the jobs lost, our withholding revenues will improve, and it allows us to continue to support all these programs they're very important to you.
Thank you. My other question, and I may follow up. I see a lot of hands up. I may follow up toward the end, Madam Chair, on some of that. But thank you. Very great. That's a great answer, and it does allay some of my fears. With Steve, small town economic assistance program, I see that there was no recommendation from the governor this year. There's 45 million unallocated. That's been authorized. Has that gone? That's gone through the bond commission. Am I correct with that assumption?
So the unallocated balance is 45 million. That means it has not yet gone through the bond commission. And then the governor did recommend in fiscal 23 another 15 million. So we would have $60 million available for the next 2 years towards the STEEP program.
Thank you. And I would imagine that that unallocated budget gets chewed up pretty quick with our small town requests.
The dollars actually stretch pretty far, and we have Undersecretary Martin leads the STEEP process. So I'm gonna tip it over to Martin. Do you want to give Representative a little bit more information on the STEEP program and how far we're able to stretch those dollars?
Sure. Thank you, Secretary, and good afternoon, Representative. So this past cycle for the STEEP program, we actually modified it slightly due to COVID, and we provided almost $12 million out to 94 municipalities. It was at a lower level instead of the $500,000 cap at $128,000, but we were able to get that out. So 94 municipalities are able to be working on projects currently going on. The last round prior to this was 2016. So you have to remember, STEEP is not an ongoing, like every year STEEP is awarded. It's done upon, the governor's announcement that they're going to do a STEEP round, if you will, and then the municipalities apply and they go through a review process and everything with the available funds.
Thank you, Martin. Appreciate that, Mr. Huff. Thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Secretary. I'll let it go. I see a lot of hands in the air, so I'll let it go. And then just thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Piscopo. Secretary, just to follow up on the Connecticut Jobs, we saw that there was $3 million in the Step Up program within for veterans that hadn't been allocated. Is there any consideration of a focus for veterans within the new Connecticut Jobs authorization, or do we have plans for the $3 million for the Step Up for the veterans in the other authorization?
We have Steve Kitowitz on the line. Steve, do you want to speak to this particular program and its use?
Yes. The Veterans Step Up program was an offshoot of a program that was enacted by the legislature for during the last recession. The basic Step Up program was run by the workforce investment boards, and it basically provided salary subsidy for employers to hire people in certain areas that had a certain level of unemployment at the time. When the veterans part came out, the DOL solicited applications, and there was never much activity around for the hiring of veterans, because in some cases they were already being well accommodated with jobs. They come out of the military pretty well skilled for jobs and people pick them up. So there really wasn't anything with the existing program language that was driving a big demand for that program. We did one allocation out of it, and it took them a long time to spend it. There were only a few employers that applied and used that program.
Got it. Okay. Well, maybe we could take a second look and see if there's a way that we can, support that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because the program language is very prescriptive in the statute.
We're happy to look at that with you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Senator Moore.
Thank you. I do want to say Representative Bora, you asked a lot of great questions regarding structure, because I think a lot of this, I think often we're critical because we don't know the process and how things are, what's the process behind why you're doing what you're doing. And so I'd be the first to say, I've been so frustrated with OPM on trying to get things done, but I do want to say it had not been communicated that there is a structure and thought process, although I believe that there is. When it's not communicated, we just see pushback, and we see things not getting done for our constituents, and we can't go back to our constituents and explain, or heads of towns and cities, as why we can't get these dollars moved. So I think it even might be a separate conversation with the chairs to talk about the thought process, so we can communicate it back and understand that it may not be happening now because of this reason, but in the future, we're thinking it could get there, right? It's really, it's almost like being an elected official. People think you're not doing anything and they come after us. And it's our fault that we haven't communicated to enough people, but also on the part of the constituent has a responsibility to find out what's going on and get the whole story of what is happening. So I'm going to take responsibility for not knowing as much as I probably should. And I'm going to give you the other half, McCall, Secretary McCall, because it's a partnership.
Of
and
course.
we need to do this between the two of us.
Of course.
So
Well,
I think,
we're happy, Senator, happy to have that conversation occur more frequently and give you updated reports on the how fast we're spending the bonds we issue and what we think we have in terms of capacity to put new projects on the agenda. And I'm sure we can improve upon it.
thank you. And we will do so on our side also. I wanted to really talk about the body cameras and the
Yes.
program. If you can just give us an update of where that is, how, the money that you've asked for, additional, is that sufficient? Something about the storage. I understand people are doing different things in different towns. Are you on top of that? And
Absolutely.
that would be helpful for me, especially
Sure.
coming from a place of my city of Bridgeport with our own issues and questions about it. That would be helpful.
Very good. Senator, I will begin, and then I have Undersecretary Mark Pelka, whom the committee is probably familiar with, who will probably fill in anything else that's needed. So we were required in Public Act 20-145 to administer the grant and aid for the body-worn camera, dashboard camera reimbursement program. The program was announced to the municipalities on February 26th of this year. And we are expecting applications to be received by OPM, and that the full $4 million is likely to be fully expended. We did put forth a proposal for an additional $2 million to be allocated towards this program. We believe additional resources will be necessary, and after coming out of a historic police accountability bill, we don't want to delay departments having the support to make these investments due to lack of resources. So it's early for us to assess demand because we haven't gotten all the applications in, but I would recommend that we continue to include some seed funding here for the program until all departments have the equipment that's necessary. And with that, Mark, I believe you have joined us today as well, if you want to speak to any more specifics for the senator. And I do not see Undersecretary Pelka, so I may have misspoken, but what we can do is when those applications come in, we're happy to have Mark submit a report to the committee to give an update on what the requests were relative to what the resources are.
And since this is safety, I was wondering why this doesn't fall under DESK and it falls under OPM.
So prior to the police accountability bill, we had a body camera program. And it was administered out of OPM because OPM does have the criminal justice division. We administer a lot of grants that go to our criminal justice agencies, judicial, DOC, public defenders. We apply for grants to the federal government. That is one of the roles of the division. There's a grants unit within the criminal justice division, along with a research unit and a policy function. So for that reason, an OPM is statutorily required to play that role of coordination of policy and resources throughout the state. And so the funds followed the past practice. It makes good sense. We do partner with DESP in terms of them providing expertise on some of the requirements for the body-worn cameras or the dash cameras, as well as other police departments and chiefs of police. And post, we bring their knowledge to the table to help support how that grant application was written. So we play that policy coordination role for the state, and that is the reason why the grant program was given to OPM to administer.
And so have you seen anything in the way of opening up the program to leasing the cameras, the body cameras?
The well, first of all, you wouldn't want to use the bonding dollars to lease. You want to purchase the asset. I mean, we're going to be to lease cameras for 5 years, and then to be paying for that lease over 20 years, typically frowned upon. When organizations do leases, capital leases, they often pay for that out of operating dollars as opposed to bonded dollars. So that would be a decision of the local municipality in terms of whether or not they want to lease. Our program does require the outright purchase, and most municipalities will build this into their capital refresh program, knowing that these cameras will have a certain useful life. Some of those contracts, Senator, build in refreshes. I happen to be a part of the entire process from start to finish in the city of Hartford when we were RFPing and demoing the products with at the time Chief Ravella, and so though it's very common for those contracts to include 5 years out for the equipment to be refreshed. I do see Undersecretary Pelka has joined, so Mark, if there's anything you want to add, please feel free to jump right in.
Thank you, Secretary, and I'm sorry about before. This program has been administered by Office of Policy and Management since 2016, recognizing the changes in policy under the Act concerning police accountability. OPM did a refresh of the program to put together a new grant announcement, which was released last month. The starting eligibility date for municipalities to submit for reimbursement under the program was the date that the Act concerning police accountability was signed into law. We've been receiving questions from various municipalities and police departments to try to be of the utmost assistance to them in preparing their applications. This Friday, State Bond Commission meeting will be the last review of body camera grants under the old program, and we are very excited about shifting into the new program. We have an announcement on our website that details all of the elements of it. Essentially, consistent with what the Secretary shared, departments are typically produce RFPs or engage different vendors that can make body, dash cam, and data storage available to them. Based on the department's review, they tend to have a preference with a vendor they're familiar with, typically that puts together an entire package encompassing the technology and the storage that they seek. Once they put together or have an idea of what they're seeking from the program, they typically engage OPM early on. We have a staff member who's managed this program from the very beginning and has extensive experience and awareness and familiarity. And we like to help the departments early on in preparing their application before the purchase is made, so that we can walk them through the process of submission to the bond commission. So in the example of this Friday, we have notified the municipalities that they are on the agenda and they're all aware. So we would hope a similar process for the other jurisdictions.
So thank you. So also, you said there's on the website, there's updates on the website about this upcoming new program?
Yes, ma'am. I'd be happy to share with the committee clerk the website link as well as the announcement. We wanted to, knowing that this would be a new program, both because of the requirement beginning in July 1, 2022 of body cameras and dash cameras being used, and the new funding, we wanted to really do a full refresh of the program to think about what questions may come our way, and having 4 years of the program, we have a list of those that have previously participated. And so we anticipated those that maybe haven't yet and would be for the first time. So we wanted to tailor the information to departments for which this would be new information. So through the clerk, I could share the announcement that we released, links to the website, and any other information you might have from me, Madam Chair.
That would be fine if you, Representative Bohr, they could send that link. And then finally, you said there's a package. Does that package include storage of the data, that it's that we're consistent on who's maintaining the data?
Madam Chair, yes, that's correct. The packages typically contain a data storage, which could be a server or a cloud. And the program provides coverage of data storage for the first year under the program. That is a concern we hear a lot about, is the amount of storage that is required. And so
when you say coverage, you're saying the state paying the cost of the coverage, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct. We will cover, the OPM program will cover expenses for the first year of data storage, plus purchases of first-time purchases of dash and body cameras from the department. And so obviously there will be ongoing costs from the storage, but we are able to cover the first year. The Act Concerning Police Accountability outlined the reimbursement rate. At the beginning of the body camera program back in 2016, there was 100% reimbursement, but as the years have gone on, the percent reimbursement has decreased. The most recent year is 50% reimbursement of the total cost of the cameras. Under an Act Concerning Police Accountability, the policy provides 50% reimbursement for distressed municipalities, 30% reimbursement for all other municipalities. So in our announcement, we have a link to the list of distressed municipality classifications, and we make the, obviously the municipalities tend to be aware when they contact us, but we make them aware of that prior to their purchase.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moore. And Mark, just a quick follow-up. Is there any benefits to a centralized storage system for the data?
That's been, thank you, Representative. That's been a question that we've certainly fielded in terms of questions. It seems to have merit to it, but we don't have current resources to provide that or to cost it out. I think this issue has accumulated over time as more municipalities have used body camera and generated footage. There would be a whole number of data privacy and also ways to redact the footage, especially with victims involved and other parties. So it's an idea that is forming but hasn't kind of reached fruition. But the body camera footage is used not only by police departments, but also by our state's attorney's offices, courts, and others. So it is a collateral effect of the increased use of video footage in criminal justice practice. So you raise a very good question. It's one that's very much kind of being discussed and thought through.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that follow-up. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Secretary. Thanks again for being with us today and for taking the time. A few follow-up questions based, I think, a bit on what my colleagues covered, but a little more detail I'm sure would be helpful for me. So in reference a bit to Representative Piscopo's question about the Career Connect account, last week I had asked Kelly with OWS if there are any other funds intended to be a part of that Career Connect account besides bonding. Do you know the answer to that?
Good to see you, Representative Farrar. With respect to the overall plans for workforce development funding, we do intend to make recommendations to the legislature on utilizing some of our state fiscal relief funds that we just were awarded through the American Rescue Plan Act to be a part of the overall workforce development investment funding source. So I'd call it a hybrid model, if I will, a little geo bonding, hopefully a good amount of some of the ARPA dollars to help support the workforce upskilling programs.
Are there other plans that you have for the federal ARP dollars that you could note specific to your bonding decisions at this point?
Our plan is still under development. As you may recall, the governor through OPM is required to submit a plan to the legislature by April 26th. So we're in the last week to week and a half of finishing that plan.
Needs to go, yeah.
So we're getting close, and we'll be able to give you a little bit more clarity, but the plan is not fully developed. But we are thinking comprehensively about those resources that have come in. And we have, in addition to the general fund, the 2.6 billion, of which you'll probably recall the governor's budget proposes 1.75 billion of those dollars to help balance the budget. So we have those funds. We also have $141 million that's come to Connecticut for capital, specifically for capital investment. And those dollars should complement this bond package, or there could be items that we're thinking of utilizing in the bond package that instead we could use the 141 million. That's why the plan is coming to you early, so that we can coordinate the final, your final decision on the bond bill with the 141 million of capital project spending and the larger state funding. So there'll be some time for you to react to it, and I'm always available to answer questions to support your final decisions.
Excellent. And so the way you're describing, as you noted, what we can expect as a legislature to see for the federal funds, particularly on the budget side, but the bonding side, it sounds like that is different than what you shared a little earlier, that there's going to be this economic action plan shared. Can you share a little bit more about how those things are different and what we can anticipate would be in the economic action plan?
So the economic action plan is going to set vision on the types of strategic economic development approaches that the governor would like to use throughout the state of Connecticut. The plan will rely on a hybrid of funding sources. Could partially include some of our ARPA dollars, some of the authorizations in this bond package that you're considering, or old authorizations that have not been utilized. We also have some funds from the MAA program and DECD where it's a revolving fund program. And so the idea here is to make a significant investment in economic development relying on multiple funding sources. So that's what you're going to see. And then also hoping that we can, this significant influx of resource might invite some private dollar investment. And of course, the underlying all of this will be the jobs that are created by these investments. And we hope that the return would be some groundless growth and more business productivity, et cetera. So we really are going to have to braid funding sources and then add to it. Representative Piscopo raised the infrastructure funds that could be coming our way when those opportunities get announced and we apply. Those could also be seed dollars towards the broader plan.
So it sounds like timing wise, you're anticipating the April 26th date in sharing the proposed plan with us, and then subsequent to that, the economic action plan. Is that accurate?
That is correct. It could very well be that they both get released simultaneously.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And then just following up on two quick questions. One about particularly the grants and aid for nonprofits. I know you had mentioned some intent of using the unallocated funds. When I was looking through the testimony that was sent our way, I just want to clarify that the last round of competitive grants were awarded in 2019. Is that accurate?
I believe that is correct.
Okay, so in the document that was sent, the expenditures that were FY20 or FY21, those would have been associated with the grants that were awarded in 2019. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I will follow up and confirm that the last year was 2019, but any expenditures are from the prior program that was the grant process was concluded and those entities were awarded the funds. They're slow to spend, so we're still carrying balances as some projects have been delayed due to COVID, and just kind of getting the contractors in place. But yes, any remaining funds are related to the prior program that was run.
Okay, yeah, and just to reiterate Representative Boer's note about, just trying to start up this request as soon as possible. Again, I know so many of our nonprofits are really in still desperate straits, and this would make such a difference. But I actually just wanted a little more information about the TDO grant program, the Responsible Growth and Transit-Oriented Development Grant Program, since that had happened for several years, but now doesn't seem like it has had awards granted of late. Could you kind of give me an update on, just kind of getting me up to speed on why that was and how you all plan on using the unallocated funds?
Great. I'm going to tip that over to Undersecretary Martin Heft. I just want to add to the nonprofit discussion. Part of our efforts over the past year have been focused on what nonprofits have conveyed as their most critical needs, and that was on the operating side. So the governor, through the Coronavirus Relief Fund, did provide $100 million in supports to our nonprofit community. We also provided more than $150 million in the general fund of funding to the nonprofits, because many of them were not seeing clients. So like some of our day programs, they were not seeing clients, and they would have suffered significant revenue losses, potentially forcing them to close their doors. So we didn't move nonprofit the grant program because at that time their need wasn't capital nature. It was how do they continue to make payroll. So we used the general fund, and we used our federal funds to prop them up, if you will. And then many of them relied on the Paycheck Protection Program for the loan that was able to be converted to a grant. So a lot of, hundreds of millions of support went to the nonprofit community. Now we're hearing a little bit more about some of their capital needs, like the need to purchase more vehicles because of the social distancing, et cetera. So our focus is shifting. But to answer your question on the transit-oriented development, under Secretary Heft, I'll turn it right over to you.
Sure, thank you. And Representative, could you just, since I was listening to the Secretary's response, could you just repeat the question on the transit-oriented development piece, and I can answer that for you?
Sure, yeah. I think I just wanted an update on where the program stands, since it has been several years since grants were put out and there's unallocated balances. As someone who has 2 TDOs in my district, I'm very mindful of this. And to Secretary McCaw's point, if ever there was a chance to continue investment in economic development, it would be building off these already investments we've made in TDOs. So I really wanted a perspective on, just where it stands and what the plan is from your stance on this.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you for just restating that for me. So there is some, limited funds that have been, allotted already for regional transit-oriented development. It's under, I think, $8 million in total. So it's not a lot of funds that are out there at all for the program. Part of it is OPM team has been working with our other agencies trying to develop, what type of projects are out there, TOD-oriented projects, looking at that, trying to, if you will, put it all into one, under one umbrella, so we can really look at what is the right potential for this. Is it, the TOD with affordable housing? Is it TOD as the transit in a different area pockets there? So that way we can look at ascertaining this money that is available, even though it's a small amount, to the best areas and focus it into those areas. So those groups have been meeting, with DOT, with DOH, with OPM on that, trying to start doing that development. We used to have a working group, if you will, a TOD working group. So they're trying to kind of reestablish that as we're moving forward, especially now as possible, federal funds coming in that might be able to use as well with all of that.
And if I could just add to that, to what Undersecretary Heft shared, I wouldn't look at just that one pot of funding when we think about TODs. And as Martin indicated, now what we try to do is sit down with the Department of Housing and understanding where are we making investments in affordable housing? Is there transportation located nearby it? How can we braid in some economic development just to make sure that our agencies are coordinating, if you will, where those opportunities are? So we should be thinking not just about that small pot of funding, but to what extent are there projects in transportation that are happening where housing can occur nearby, where we can braid with that some Urban Act related economic development projects. And so that, I think the meat of it really is, how do you plan, how do you coordinate things that are happening across multiple agencies? And then how do we get our municipalities to also surface some of those ideas? I'm hoping through you as their legislators and their representatives, so that you're putting forth ideas as well, where they're aware of what's happening at the local level of housing, and they're saying, you know what, there's a building nearby that needs to be remediated. Let's get this ready for development. So that is the way the administration is leading, is trying to bring these agencies together from a planning perspective so that the dollars can be more meaningful, because you're targeting, doing 3 or 4 initiatives in one space to precisely achieve what you're referring to. So I welcome, the governor and I welcome those types of ideas coming through your request for funding as well.
Yeah, that's very good to hear. And I appreciate the holistic approach. And I think what was striking to me, to your point, Secretary, and Martin, what you shared is just that there hadn't been any distribution in the last few years. I'm glad to hear that there is planning efforts afoot. And I think for us as legislators, to your point, Secretary, we are gathering ideas, and input from, our local leaders and our community leaders. And it'd be helpful for us to know, again, how you see these funding sources fitting together so we can give the best guidance to our local officials as well.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Farrar. Representative Yacarino.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for your diligence and the great job you do as OPM Secretary. Just have a couple of questions. I see there's money for the Bioscience Innovation Fund, which I really appreciate. I don't know if you could expand on that, but also the budget from 2 years ago, in the budget, there was a cut of 19% for research and development for the sciences and STEM, and also the tax credit for STEM students was eliminated. I don't know, we have some bills in finance this year to try to reinstate those credits. I don't know what your take is on that.
Thank you so much, Representative Yacarino. Appreciate your kind remarks. So we obviously honor the automatic authorization that is an allocation that's reflected in the law for the Bioscience Innovation Fund. I think there are a number of ways to get at incentivizing success in the area of STEM. Certainly, you're going to hear a lot about that in terms of the workforce development. The Jobs Tax Credit Program is another area whereby employers could be encouraged to expand jobs in that area. The tax credit programs, they're good proposals. Obviously, that's all going to come to how do we balance this budget and do it in a responsible way. We're making such great headwind with, Moody's recognizing our fiscal due diligence. The question is, what's the best path to get there? Is there a commitment to continue to grow Connecticut's success in the STEM area? Absolutely. We just have to figure out the best path to do so.
I appreciate that. I look at the economy, and as far as jobs, that's one of the strongest fields really in the world, especially with the pandemic, with all the research and development. And we have so many great institutions in Connecticut, Yale, UConn, and University of New Haven. There's just so many. I don't want to leave everybody out, but there's so many. And I think we should really harness that. I know Massachusetts, I say this all the time, but they did it 11 years ago, and they put a lot of money between state, venture capital, and in academic, and it's really thrived for Massachusetts. I think they're the leader in the country now. So I appreciate you keeping to that commitment. But also, I don't see it in the package, but your take on the VOAG and VOTech schools. I think they're really very productive for graduation rates, jobs, and some sort of talent. So I don't know if you mind just expanding on that.
Absolutely. I think we have an incredible opportunity with our VOAG and our CTech schools. Also in the workforce program, and some of what you're going to see in the governor's plan that comes out, is how do we maximize use of the CTEX as a school? Are there opportunities to expand some of the evening programs? I mean, we have the assets there, the materials are there, the machines are there, and we need to be thinking beyond the traditional school day and how we can help adults in this space. I'm going to ask Deputy Secretary Diamantis to share some thoughts. This is an area where he has partnered over the years with Superintendent Wibby, and I want to have you share some of the collective thoughts we've been having on this topic.
Thank you.
Certainly, the tech schools have been an important part, as you know, with respect to El Grasso and EB, looking for welders and other types of work that we're doing out there. Of course, they coordinate with DOL, and it's critically important. And we've been, even in designing and building the tech schools, ensuring that the programs that each of the schools offer, based on their area, that it's meeting particular need that exists, so that when the kids are leaving, they're in some cases leaving with a certificate,
Right.
that they're finding gainful employment as they're leaving those schools, and ensuring that they're providing those programs. You've heard me say 1,000 times, schools are the second most utilized buildings next to bridges and highways. Nothing is more utilized than a school building, and it's multiple use that it does in fact have, including evening programs for adults, and it should be using it. I will suggest to you they're underutilized. The governor and the secretary, of course, are looking to maximize their use and have people go through the programs and the various good programs that we have. I will say this to you, and I've said it to the superintendent. I watch the schools often because I have an interest in them, and we do very, very, very well on the tech side, on the machine side of the program. We need to maintain high standards as well on the academic side, because as you know, in the tech school program, they switch on and off. 3 weeks I believe it's 3 weeks in the tech side, and then 3 weeks in the academic side. What we don't want is students coming out who are excellent at their job, but when it comes time to reading prints and understanding the diagrams and looking at design, that they have deficiencies. So it's really a total program. Superintendent Jeff Wibby is doing an excellent job of ensuring those standards are met on both sides of the equation. And I think our students are doing far better at this point than they were in the past. So they're an excellent program.
I appreciate that. I visited last year an after-school program at Eli Whitney for kids, say troubled high school kids that left their traditional school to go there, and it's extremely successful. I think we should do more of that. I'm in North Haven, but Lyman Hall is the next town over, and it's just amazing the rate of success there. So I appreciate the OPM secretary and your responses. I would hope we would think more common sense when it comes to really things that really work. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, sir, for your response.
Thank you, Representative Yacarino. Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Secretary, I won't take too much of your time because we're going to have the pleasure of one another's virtual company tomorrow at the Bond Commission hearing. I'd just like to relate some of my comments to Representative Meskers and Representative Farrar in terms of where we need to be. We look at the American Jobs Plan, we look at that American Rescue Plan money. In the past, certainly with regard to federal matches, they have looked for shovel-ready projects. So there are a vast array of funding needs and desires here. How are we placed, and this is more a qualitative question, to be in a position to seize these opportunities where we can use these federal dollars to supply a large part of what we're looking for? So and as I say, we can talk offline about this, but I just to get a sense of where we are. I know you're working on a lot. Are we placed in the right place to be able to move quickly with some of these initiatives?
Representative Cheeseman, for the past 6 to 7 months, every time the governor and I meet with the Department of Transportation, this is the top of mind item. And Commissioner Giletti, from a transportation perspective, is ready with shovel-ready projects that have been designed. That is the reason why our bond commission agendas Always include designing projects for the future, because you cannot wait until the resources are there and they're ready to bear. And then, it takes, a year to plan these significant infrastructure projects. So yes, we are ready. We're ready to apply. We've also been getting the department ready in terms of the engineers and the internal expertise that they will need in anticipation of significant funding coming our way. So the agency is gearing up from a staffing perspective. We've been very intentional about that. And so I feel very comfortable that we will be ready to harness this opportunity. And the governor's attention is absolutely right where you're thinking.
Okay, and that's obviously the DOT, the roads, bridges, tunnels piece, but looking at some of the other funding sources, I know the governor has his broadband initiative. Again, there's $100 billion. So not just our roads and bridges, but for broadband, you mentioned affordable housing, there's money in there. Again, are we in the right place to be able to use these federal dollars to move quickly to advance some of these incredibly important initiatives?
Sure. And in the area of housing, and if Commissioner Salem Mosquito Bruno and her team, they don't wait for the dollars to be available. There are always projects that are in the pipeline that maybe are in design or have not yet closed. So what you see in a bond agenda is what's ready to move, but there's a lot of work that team always has going on in the background so that the pipeline continues. The agency recently did a survey of need to figure out where are the needs from an affordable housing perspective, where are there opportunities. Commissioner started that process over a year ago so that could support our planning process. Now in broadband, obviously we're just starting that particular initiative. It's critically important that some of the resources that are not necessarily in the bonding package, but on the appropriation side get funded. For example, we need GIS mapping throughout the state. We need to figure out where we have the infrastructure, where we do not have the infrastructure. We need to have a mapping of the speeds so that we can do that planning. So I'm happy that the federal government is focused on this direction, and I'm thankful that the administration began our planning process over 6 months ago so that we're ready to put a package of legislation in front of you. The work to get ready, though, is contained in that legislation and in the funding resources that we've asked for through the Appropriations Committee. So we have a little bit more work, a little bit more to get ready on the broadband front, but the team is engaged. And if the resources are provided, we certainly will be well positioned. Undersecretary Heft, I don't know if you want to comment at all just from some of the GIS mapping work and your division's role in some of the broadband support to help Representative Cheeseman.
Sure, thank you, Secretary. So yes, we've been working, as the Secretary mentioned, looking at, both broadband as well as GIS. Actually have a meeting tomorrow going over some of those funding opportunities and looking at, those capital investments that we have our team working on, trying to also do that, as I mentioned earlier, interagency. As all of this, stems over a number of agencies. GIS isn't just one agency. Emergency management uses it, DEEP uses it, public safety uses it. So trying to coordinate all of that. OPM, has the authority to oversee GIS under state statutes, but it is over multiple agencies. So we're trying to work together, again, building that team, building those resources and everything. And we're also looking at the same, with the broadband, looking at ways of rolling that out to, make those improvements.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, wearing one of my other committee hats, energy and technology, obviously we've been closely involved with that. And my final comment again on carrying on from Secretary Moore and Representative Farrar, as much information as you can supply that we can take back to our municipalities, our agencies, so they are in a position to partner with you where there are those funding opportunities, really knowing what the process is, what the opportunities are, to keep those lines of communication going, because I think that's critical as we all work together to build the state that's successful for everybody who lives here. So I know there are other questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Dora.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cheeseman, for all of those great questions. Representative Duchette, and I'm going to guess I know what he's going to ask about.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, you can tell me later if you guessed correctly.
Manufacturing?
That was one of them. I had a couple
Okay.
of quick questions, but I just did want to say, for the rest of the committee who have been asking great questions, I have just a couple of follow-ups. Most of my initial questions have been answered. And of course, to say hello, Madam Secretary, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us, and to your great team, as always. So I just quickly want to start, and Representative Cheeseman, I think, expressed this as well. I want to sort of associate my comments with Senator Moore, I think, said it well, that we really, really would love the opportunity, and I think we really all feel this way, to have a continued dialogue with you, as we do then go back to our constituents and our municipalities and have to answer questions about projects that we've been working on for some years, and funds that have been authorized, allocated. So again, I think I echo the comments of my colleagues, and I'm sure you understand. Yes, so I did have two questions. One was sort of, yes, related to the manufacturing, and I did also want to associate my comments with Representative Piscopo, who talked about Career Connect and the workforce programs, which I'm excited to see get going. But I guess a little bit of my concern is with the large dollar amount, how much of that is shovel ready, if you will, ready to be implemented and ready to be put into place, as soon as these programs are ready to get going. So again, we had this conversation with Kelly. I'm looking for a little more detail on Career Connect. But then on that point, yes, in terms of manufacturing, you had a conversation with Representative Yacarino about the tech schools. Something that I'm very interested in is also programs in the comprehensive high schools as well. Derby High School is a model statewide for that. We had a bill a few years ago that was to design a program to start more Derby High School type programs in collaboration with the nearby community colleges as well. So I guess my question on that is there funding available for those types of programs, number one? And then two, with respect to the VOTEC, following up in your conversation with Representative Yacarino, how are the needs of those programs funded for actual equipment, either expanding what's already there or building out new programs in the VOTEC schools?
Great. So Representative Duchette, I won't ask if Madam Chair got your question right, but let me start, and then I'll tip it to a couple members of the team. So manufacturing investments come to play in this bond bill in a number of ways. Obviously, our distressed municipalities grant does help munis with property tax losses due to exemptions from any businesses in their communities that have qualified manufacturing facilities. We can make investments in manufacturing through the Urban Act grant if there are viable projects that you bring forth for your communities. When I think about the VOTEC school program, or well, before I go to VOTECs, some other areas where we've made some investments have been in higher education. Our Connecticut state colleges and universities, they've brought forth a number of ideas where they had opportunities to do renovations and bring in some of the manufacturing equipment. Sometimes it's donated. Also our community technical colleges, and whenever there is an initiative that has come to the administration to support manufacturing, whether it's to put the infrastructure in place so they can expand the educational program, the governor has supported those initiatives. As far as the VOTEC schools and the regular high schools, I'm going to ask Deputy Diamantis to talk about how that gets incorporated into the construction or renovation program through Oscar, to incorporate that in as a part of the broader academic plan for schools. So Deputy Diamantis, can you please comment further?
Sure. Obviously, when we are in the process of building the schools, the equipment comes with the program that we're doing in the tech school system and in the agricultural program as well. We do all those programs. So the equipment comes through us. One of the things I'll be asking the legislature at some point is not making the equipment necessarily a priority school project, because as you can imagine, if the tech school system is looking to adapt to a program that is immediate and there's an immediate need, waiting an entire year for the legislature to act on a priority list so that I can expend funds to purchase equipment, as some of you can imagine, is very expensive in some cases. We'd like to move quickly, but we do that. We do that based on the types of programs that each tech school is providing and promoting as a result of their location. We certainly try to coordinate with the various industries that are there and are looking to expand. And certainly expanding based on those discussions that are occurring with the governor and the secretary, and the type of work we're looking to promote and what industry we're looking to promote, where we see there's a future for the kids to participate. On the high school level, it's a little different, right? Because what used to be home economics and all those kinds of programs, they're all gone now. We call them something fancier. And user, types of user spaces that we have and maker spaces that are in the schools, depending on the types of programs we're providing. We're very cautious on one hand to ensure that we're not taking from the tech school program, and we don't want to duplicate seats. So we try to make sure that where we have a tech school program available and nearby and students can participate, that we shore up those programs. On the other hand, if there is a distance issue, and then we try to show up a program on a local level to whatever that school may be, whether it's Derby in a type of a tech program. We're involved now with schools that are looking to expand a tech type program, not to the degree of machine work, but other types of things. An IBM program that's up in, that's down, I should say, in Norwalk, for instance, and such things. So we provide those. They are alteration programs, because usually the space needs to change, and we will provide the equipment that goes with that particular course, especially if it's being regionalized, where we can offer it someplace in one particular town because they have the bones and the available space, and we know it's going to be utilized in a regional district. We encourage it always.
So
hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. So the deputies clarified that through the traditional Oscar program, traditional schools can use the alterations process. If they wanted to expand their program on the Voc Tech schools, I would note that in SDE, there are authorizations for general infrastructure projects, equipment vehicles. So if the Voc Tech need to do some expansion or some replacement of equipment, they have $7.3 million unallocated. The governor also recommended some additional authorizations for the schools. It's about $29 million in the biennium. So the resources are certainly there for Voc Tech or traditional schools if they want to expand in this space. I would say we might want to think about how it is that we set that vision for the state of Connecticut. So whether it's through utilizing a grant announcement process so that our districts are thinking along these lines, and I believe the tech schools are already doing so. So we should think about how to make that visionary statement for our state so that districts are leaning in this direction of expanding and ultimately making sure the kids are getting the opportunities in STEM.
Madam Secretary, just to add to that, I think the other thing that's important to note is we're trying to create a program within our own Oscar, as we, of course, meet with folks, to create a nexus between the technical high schools, the state technical high schools, the local technical high schools, the community technical colleges, and the community colleges. Because sometimes there are services there that there's a nexus there, and it would be great to see those kids going through those various programs. Keep in mind, there is a push from members of your caucuses that would like to see children progress, our students progress out of the tech school programs into project management and construction management. And in today's day and age, an associate's degree is not enough for either of those programs or a two-year program, and they are extensive, but it's a great stepping stone from the tech schools or from your local high school's tech program into a project management course, getting into those 2-year programs and eventually into the 4-year program. It starts, and once they get the bite and they taste it, the students usually like it, and they'll, what they thought they were never going to do, which was go to college to get that degree, well, they ended up going to college because they love construction and they loved construction management, and they proceed. So we need to create that nexus as a team.
And that leads to just the
Agree.
final, to crystallize that is the focus of the Governor's Workforce Council, is to create these career pathways and to make sure that they're visible to the students so that they can see how they can progress in their career and ultimately get to the degree and grow a bit further. That's the strategic focus that the Office of Workforce Strategy is bringing to the table, is creating that nexus and linking the programs. That's one thing that is critically necessary, so that throughout the state, kids know the pathway to get there. Or adults.
No, I agree with all of that. That's great. And this is, I didn't mean to sort of take this discussion. I mean, we could talk forever about this. And that's one of the things. So as you said, we need that nexus because we're talking about education, but we're also talking about workforce. And in my experience with this, and I've been working for some years now to try to assist a program that just started up at Manchester High School, again, a comprehensive high school. I found that it is, it's hard to know where to go with this. We're all swimming in the same direction, but we have, I don't want to call them silos, but we have, workforce happening here. We have the DOL program. We have this new workforce council. We have obviously SDE, and we have the community college system, which are all trying to do the same thing, working towards the same goal. So yes, I mean, there needs to be that nexus. And again, I would submit that the VOTEC schools are doing wonderful work and much more highly specialized, but we also need, because it is so vital to our workforce, and geographically speaking, where I am, the aerospace industry, we've got lots of machine shops. We also need that in the comprehensive high schools, smaller programs that offer those students in the comprehensive high schools who don't, want to go full bore at the tech school, the opportunity to do it as well, and then bring that under the community college. So again, I'm sort of been looking for a way to fund those programs that is dedicated, that doesn't sort of, have competing demands, whether it's incumbent worker training over here or whether it's other school construction needs on the SD side. So I think we're all in agreement. We just have to keep working towards that goal. Second quick question, hopefully quick, and Representative Farrar covered most of this about the American the Rescue Plan. So I'd be interested to know, when that report comes out on the 26th, what things look like and how it may change our bond bill. Specifically, one thing I just wanted to flag for you, on the banking committee, we've been doing a lot of work around foreclosure relief, working with CHFA. I understand there's going to be a good amount of money specifically for foreclosure relief and housing. And at the same time, I've had some conversations with CHFA where they're, again, the picture is sort of unclear given those federal funds coming in, what the long-term needs and what the long-term funding of EMAC particularly is going. So just wanted to flag that for you. That's something that we're going to be looking out for specifically, how much of those funds are going. And it's hard to tell what our needs are going to be in terms of foreclosure. I think unlike the last economic downturn, we're not expecting a huge tsunami of foreclosures, but we don't know what's going to happen when all the moratoriums are lifted. So we want to make sure that EMAP as a program is ready to meet that demand, whether it be through federal dollars or whether it's something that this subcommittee should be considering supplementing. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Duchette. And before we go to Representative Piscopo, just a follow-up on the VOTEC question. So do the VOTECs know, I didn't know, do the VOTECs know that there's funding available through SDE for general infrastructure?
Yes, they do.
They do. So we communicate that to them. Okay.
Yes.
And then also, I'm really encouraged by Connecticut Innovations in Connecticut CT Next that also has those incubator programs that they look at that really connect the colleges and the business aspect of the colleges to new career opportunities. So I think the work that they've been doing has been really great too. And Deputy Diamantis, I am so glad that there is no more home ec, because I don't know if you're as old as I am, but we've certainly come a long way from the days of when the boys took wood shop and the girls took sewing and cooking.
The only one I regret, if I can say, Representative Borer, is the one that they gave up typing, because I'm a one finger guy and I get very frustrated very easily. And
Yeah.
John Piscopo is no better at typing than I am.
Typing is a skill we could all use. And with that, good segue, Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will confess I did take home ec, but the principal kicked me out the first day of class, so he wouldn't let me in there. But anyway, Madam Secretary, I think our House Chair, I think it was one of her first questions on your municipal grants and aid for municipal purposes. It's great to hear your flexibility on that. And just a quick hypothetical, well, not even a hypothetical, it's a real case. If I have a shovel-ready project, very worthy project, that it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to fall in a certain category. There's not a certain, you have Urban Act, you have state. This is more for your flexibility to kind of address a municipality's needs. That's a good assumption to make, correct?
Representative Piscopo, I'm not sure I understood the question. Were you asking about the grants for municipal projects and purposes and the flexibility?
Yes.
Yes, certainly. Those dollars have a formula allocation, but when they are provided to municipality, your finance director will certify that the dollars are being used for proper capital purposes, but certainly not limited. I mean, if you wanted to use it to pave sidewalks throughout your city, or if there was an economic development project, or just items that really are of a capital nature, there is certainly flexibility there. And obviously, if the prescribed amount that's given through the grants for municipal projects and purposes isn't adequate, then we have the Urban Act vehicle to help support some of the larger projects as well.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I know we're bumping up against our time here, Madam Chair, but I was just another question I had was on broadband. Representative Cheeseman kind of piqued my. I had a follow-up on her question. I like your approach to broadband. I think that is a legitimate capital expenditure. My district is having a little problem with broadband with availability there. Not so much as the Northeast Connecticut and Northwest Connecticut corners. I see we could just make this happen. The bill we had in energy and technology was loaded on the backside, I believe, with a lot of regulation. And so I think we could just, nothing is ever easy, but I think we could expand broadband with federal dollars and all those things you mentioned in a more simple manner, if you would, or method. Can we agree on that? Because take a little political heat, to be honest with you, for raising those questions.
Yes, Representative. Look, I think we have a decision to make about what's important for the people of the state of Connecticut, and the pandemic shined a bright light on that everyone should be able to telehealth. To use telehealth. Every child should be able to Zoom and participate in classroom or after school activities. And so there's a need. The question is, how do we get there, right? The bill is focused on taking away or no longer making it a choice as to which zip codes should have those critical resources and which should not. And obviously it places a demand to fund that infrastructure on providers. Thankfully, the federal delegation, our president they have wisdom and the foresight to focus in on this area. Those resources can really help with that burden, the cost burden. One of the things we're looking into right now, the Office of Policy Management has been thinking about, is there's also a component that will rest upon the homeowner and making sure that when the infrastructure is put in under the ground, that the cost for them to connect to it could be burdensome. So there are a lot of things to think about. We're kind of just scratching the surface right now, but the infrastructure funding should help us make some progress. The capital improvement fund that came from ARPA is another opportunity for us to think about how to support those homeowners with their portion of the cost. And the administration stands ready to partner with the legislature on how to get that bill across the finish line and bring some of your ideas to the table on what needs to be smoothed out. So the lines of communication are absolutely open, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and I appreciate that. And then just a real quick comment question, if you will. One of my big compliments to this administration, the governor, is that all his agencies have an excellent communication with the legislature, thus the people of Connecticut. Every agency we go to is very, very responsive. I served with a lot of governors, and this is a really outstanding thing for him. So I compliment him very, very highly on that. I understand you're going through. I can't even imagine what your day is like. So I don't want to ever bother you if I don't have to. Your Undersecretary Costas Diamandis is great. He'll show up, and he's always at the other end of the line. Can we approach maybe your undersecretaries, Heft or Pelka, and with questions or comments, or maybe even a visit? And not putting you on a spot, I'd love for you to pay a visit out to some of the projects that we deem very, very necessary for some of our towns.
Representative, we would be happy to welcome you to the agency at any time. The deputies available, the undersecretaries are here. This is a team, and they are available to you whenever they can be of assistance. Don't hesitate to pick up the phone, and I'm happy to come out and see some of the projects. We try to do that when the requests come in so that we understand the impact that these items will have in the community. So never too busy to make some time to support your goals. So please do reach out.
Thank you very much again, Madam Secretary. Thank the team you brought with you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Piscopo. And just to add to that, I know that DECD has also been very great about coming out into the community and really, whether it was David Lehman or David Corus would come and take a ride around the city and just see what the opportunity is. And sometimes they think of things that maybe the local officials haven't thought of. So they lend a lot of experience and knowledge to that process. So we have about 20 minutes left. I don't see any more hands, but I kept a running list of questions throughout the agencies that were not that they deferred to you, but they didn't really have a complete answer. So we said we would ask you. And let me start with school security. So we have about $5 million in unallocated funds in school security. Can you tell us what the plans are for releasing those funds?
All right, Mr. Deputy, this is your area. Over to you, sir.
Well, the school security funding that we're talking about is a joint endeavor between the State Department of Education, DESP, and ourselves. Well, my other role as Director of School Construction, we meet. It is our intent to move those funds forward and continue in that process, because it is not just, of course, as you know, the public schools, but it's also some of the privates get a piece of that. And of course, a determination is made usually by primaries if the school has been threatened in one way or another, whether it's through a racist act or it's through hate crimes or whatever the case. So we take all types of things into account when we allocate those funds to make sure we're getting them to the neediest places.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And then there was, actually, I forget what agency it was. It was $10 million in cultural funds to support cultural and historic organizations in our community. I think that was DAS. Oh, no, it was DECD, sorry. I'm confusing my agencies. Do you have information about releasing those funds into the community and organizations?
Representative Borer, thank you for the question. We have been, Commissioner Lehman and I have been in pretty good contact with our cultural organizations. And what we really heard over the past year is many of them were focused on how do they keep the lights on. They're struggling with just meeting basic operational expenses. Many of them had to lay off employees. The need for the past year has been in operating support. So we put out about $11 million to make up for their revenue losses because we had forced closures or reduced, capacity that they could have. So what we are hearing is that as we slowly reopen, the need is less on the bonding side, but on giving them more support for the revenue losses until they are able to fully reopen, until our vaccines are rolled out and they're able to have a good number of people in their facilities. So we don't have plans right now from a capital perspective. We have plans from the perspective of our ARPA dollars to help these organizations over the next 6 to 9 months.
Okay, great. So let me ask you a technical question, which I don't know the answer to. For whether it's school security or cultural organizations or the nonprofit grants, does there need to be an allocation on the bonding commission agenda in order for you to put out a request for applications for grants? Are you able to do that? So for example, you said the next meeting will be late June, early July. And you're hearing from us that we would love to see, those funds go out into the community, and there's a commitment on OPM's part to get those funds out into the community. Is it possible to start to get that ball rolling so that by the time the funds are put in the allocation on the bonding commission agenda, we're ready to go?
Yes, if there are areas that you're interested in seeing that they're priorities for the administration and we want to have an advanced competitive process, we can certainly consider that. We do that now for housing. We don't wait for the dollars to move. We start that process. When the administration came in, I will tell you, we had been doing so much of that. We had a backlog. We had so many allocations that needed to move, and we did not have adequate resources in the budget to fund it. So we're trying to play catch up. I think we're in a good shape now. If we want to put some grants out in advance and then move the dollars, absolutely. Send over your areas where you think, where you feel that there are priorities, and we will we'll certainly partner with you.
That's great. I think that's great. I think because you mentioned, for example, in cultural, that some of those organizations, that makes sense because they've been receiving the operational support, might not be in a position to make those capital improvements, but we don't know what other organizations are out there, right? There might be new organizations or older organizations that all of a sudden have this need as a result of how hard they've been hit. So I think if we put that out there and find out what the need is, right, and we get ready to disperse it. Okay. School construction, I think all of our questions from previous meetings have been answered. There were questions throughout the week around overlap for requests for improvements to state buildings. That it seems that the individual agencies had requests for improvements, whether it was ADA or technical, but also we see that in your recommendations. Are you reconciling the two? Are they, is there overlap?
Yes, there's no overlap. The process is the agencies. We start our budget process with the agencies making the request for their capital budget through the Office of Policy and Management, and those projects get vetted, and then the items that are recommended are in the governor's proposal. So what they're requesting for projects are the items that are in this package. For general infrastructure, we will look at what the agencies have available that they haven't spent. Sometimes we've allocated dollars in the bond commission and they have millions of dollars that they're sitting on, and then they're looking for additional movement, and we'll say you should start spending down what you have. We monitor their authorized but unallocated balances, and then we will assess based on their new needs, the size of the renovations they might need. Do they need more authorizations to get them through the 2-year period? So we're 100% coordinated. What you have in front of you represents the request for the needs for their buildings.
Okay, great. All right, so we're confident there's no overlap. We appreciate that.
Sure.
And then a burning question, pun intended, is the firefighter training. So we have $24 million in unallocated funds for the firefighter training school. And we know that there's a request in for the Valley firefighting training, Wolcott and Middlesex. I don't think the 24 million covers all three, but there is funds in unallocated that could address them. And I actually took the opportunity to meet with the firefighters because I wanted to understand the lay of the land, the map geographically. And there is, and I'll send that map to you, there is a significant gap where the population is for our volunteer firefighters. We have almost 24,000 volunteer firefighters in the state, give or take, and about 5,000 paid firefighters. So we have 30,000 firefighters across the state that have been asking us about the status. And we asked DAS about the status and they said they were unsure. So wondering if you could lend some information.
I have not seen those requests of recent, so I'd be happy to have you resubmit them and we'll take a look at them for certain.
Okay, great. We could do that. And then maybe set up a meeting, maybe with some fire representatives to talk about those requests that can.
More than happy to do so.
Speak to do that. Okay. And then I actually see a couple more questions. I just want to follow up. We heard a couple of times today about the importance of just getting status updates. So I'm wondering if, and I could talk to the rest of the leadership on this committee, if maybe we set up a standing quarterly meeting between the chairs of the bonding subcommittee and the leaders of OPM, just to get a, doesn't have to be formal, but just to get a status update so that we can bring it back to our legislators and they can get that information out so that, we're more educated around what the plans are, because when the folks in our district that we hear from feel like they don't have answers or they're in the dark, it's difficult for us. So the more information we could say to them, it's not coming out this month, it will be coming out in 3 months, or here's what we're planning on doing with that. It just is so important to them and important to us to be able to give that information. So let's maybe set up a structure like that. And then,
absolutely.
Yeah, great. Senator Moore.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on Representative Borer's comment just now about communicating with us on what's happening. I think it would be helpful just before a bond meeting, once you've made that decision, to give us the heads up and explain to us the mindset for that moment, because I think what you do well is that you adjust to the times and the needs, right? And so although we may have a set path of what we think is happening, you've made an adjustment based on something that has transpired that we don't know about in your process. I think that would be helpful, that we knew just before a bond meeting that this is what we're going to do and this is the reasoning we're doing it. So we would be prepared to respond to our constituents and to our municipalities, because I think it's important for you. I think it's important really for us to be able to go back to our municipalities and explain the process. I know I have several towns that are very frustrated with me, and I tell them that I don't really have the checkbook, but I know who does have the checkbook.
Of course, indeed.
And I need to explain why we're not paying this bill this month. All right, and so I think that is the core of what we need to really focus on how the money's flowing and what your decisions are and the mindset. So, and I won't beat that up anymore. I just want to make sure we are committed to communicating up and down and across. All right.
Absolutely. We can certainly set up regular cadence so that you can understand what's coming to bear and what's not, and the reasons for that. Obviously, you're an extension, and your voice is going back to the community. And we also want your ideas on areas the governor wants to focus in on, and we need your partnership to bring those types of initiatives, so that your municipalities feel that we're making investments, that they're investments that you also believe in yourselves, and that it's adequately distributed throughout the state. So we can absolutely get that calendared and make sure that those lines of communication are open.
Thank you. And then finally, we were talking about the investments in the body cameras and maintaining them. And you mentioned you wouldn't want to do a 20-year bond on something that was 5 years, but we do that on computers, right? So
We do.
would you consider, at least
They're not
consider
leased.
perhaps leasing?
They're not leased assets. We purchased them outright. And we'll take that back and think that through a bit further, Senator Moore. Maybe we should take this offline. It sounds like there's a specific need as to why you're inquiring about a lease.
A specific legislator who
Okay,
is
yes. I would love to hear a
looking
little bit more, We'll take that offline and you can give me a little bit more of the details on how the program is restrictive. And we'll figure out the best path to get there.
Thank you. And thank you for this information and the rest of the committee. The questions that they've asked are very informative, and you've done a great job today of sharing that information. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moore. And I agree. It's been a great dialogue, a lot of great information.
Thank you.
Last but not least is Representative Mushinski.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask the Secretary if there is a general policy for a nonprofit who never became an official nonprofit under IRS rules. I have some nonprofits. Mostly they are heritage type groups, ethnic groups that have facilities and they need help because of COVID. And they never became a formal 501c3 under IRS. Does OPM work with those groups, or do you have to be a nonprofit first legally before you get help from OPM?
I believe you do need to have official IRS 501c3 status. Representative, I'd like to take this one offline and have a little bit more understanding about the organizations that you're referencing, and it will bring some of the other folks from OPM to assess whether they qualify. So if you reach out, we'll get something calendared with you and answer your questions in more detail.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Well, what great timing. 1:29. We booked to 1:30. I'm going to take advantage of that 1 minute and just ask one last question about the distressed municipalities. And what is the difference between the distressed municipality recommendation versus the other bonding recommendations that address distressed municipalities?
Representative, the governor first of all, we recognize that municipalities across the state have been advocating and looking for additional municipal aid. And we obviously have some constraints right now with a sizable budget deficit that we had to close over the biennium. But the governor did want to be responsive and felt that it was important to be responsive to those that had the greatest needs, highest percentage of tax exempt property, poverty, all of those conditions that make it harder for them to cover their general fund operating costs as well as to make investments. And so what is different about this package is the $50 million that is included to just go towards distressed municipalities. It's the top 25. This is a hybrid program with 50 million of bonding and 50 million of the coronavirus relief funds to support the municipality. So it's the scope, the number of municipalities, and the fact that there are additional resources through hybrid funding sources. Now, I imagine that throughout our time between now and when the session closes, there will likely be discussions and negotiations on whether this is the best way to help municipalities, given the $1.5 billion that munis are going to receive. So appreciate us being able to share some thoughts as we finalize the package together on whether we want to include this in here or focus in on the significant resources that the federal government has provided. So I think that'll be an ongoing discussion, certainly from the governor's perspective. Okay, great. That's good. So the intent is it more operational funding relief or capital projects, bonding type support? So some municipalities, and many of them, will utilize these funds and they will deposit them, if you will, into their general fund, because there are always some manner of capital expenses you're incurring, whether you're covering debt service for projects. Some municipalities have cash or pay-as-you-go capital improvement plans. So there's always a nexus back to capital, but you have many ways of getting there. You could record this as revenue and you have offsetting expenses elsewhere that still meet the capital requirement. That's not any way different than the grants for municipal projects and purposes. Municipalities treat this differently. Some put it in a restricted fund and they only they dedicate capital projects. Others put it in the general fund and it offsets, cost in the Department of Public Works for other capital investments. So I'd say wearing my municipal CFO hat, there's some flexibility there. But I mean, you're not going to use it to pay salaries. You really have to have some expenses, debt service, et cetera, that have some nexus back to capital costs.
Great. I appreciate it. And coming, as you know, from a distressed municipality, I appreciate the focus and, the understanding about the need.
Thank you.
So I do not see any more hands up. So I just want to take the opportunity on behalf of the entire committee to really thank you all for being here. So a lot of great information. We're having a workshop tomorrow amongst our subcommittee members to discuss the governor's bond bill, all of the information and input from the agencies and yourself at OPM, and hope to vote this bill out, I think, Wednesday out of the Finance Committee. So more to come. We might have follow-up questions as we continue to work through the bill and make any adjustments. So we appreciate your willingness, and just thank you to you and your entire team for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Mañana.
Mañana.
Thank you very much.